The War Powers Resolution was passed in 1973 under President Nixon. By 1973, Americans had grown weary of the Vietnam War, Democrats and Republicans alike. The War Powers Resolution was introduced in the House in May 1973, quickly went through both houses during summer, was vetoed by Mr. Nixon on October 24th, and Congress overrided that veto by November 7th, thus making the War Powers Resolution. Specifically, the War Powers Resolution requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing armed forces to use military action and forbids armed forces from remaining more than 60 days, with a further 30-day withdrawal period without authorization of the use of military force or declaration of war. Pictured here is the SS Montague, the first incident involving the War Powers Resolution. Also, the end of the Vietnam War. President Reagan utilized the War Powers Resolution during the 80s during his misadventures in Central America in sending American troops to invade Grenada, claiming that since Congress had funded the armed forces, they were implicitly giving him consent to commit armed forces to the region. When we went to Iraq for the first time in 1991, President George H.W. Bush sent reports to Congress regarding the buildup of forces in Iraq. President Bush took the position that he doesn't need authority from Congress to carry out the United Nations resolution, which authorized all member states, i.e. every nation in the world, to use all necessary means to eject Iraq from Kuwait. He did ask Congress for support of the Operation Persian Gulf, and Congress replied favorably. Congress told Bush he could only use force if diplomatic efforts had failed. They failed. Therefore, he was allowed by Congress to use force in Operation Desert Storm. The first open conflict between Congress and the President over war came during President Clinton's peacekeeping operations in Yugoslavia when we were bombing Serbia, Kosovo, and Montenegro. During this time, President Clinton sent reports to Congress under the law, saying it was in conjunction with the War Powers Resolution, but it never triggered the 60-day time limit. Therefore, several congressmen, frustrated with President Clinton, Representative Tom Campbell and several other House Republicans filed a lawsuit against President Clinton in the case Campbell versus Clinton in the U.S. District Court of Appeals, but this case was thrown out. President Clinton's argument was that it was not the United States who was specifically doing the bombing, it was all of NATO, therefore he did not need to invoke the resolution. Of course, after 9/11, Congress passed the law authorizing President Bush to use all necessary and appropriate means against those nations, organizations, and persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on 9/11. For the first time, organizations and persons are specified in congressional authorization to use force. Therefore, since Congress authorized this, the War Powers Resolution was not necessary. Thus, the United States invaded Afghanistan shortly thereafter 9/11. Finally, in 2003, Congress jointly passed the authorization of force against Iraq, and then we invaded Iraq in 2003. This law has caused controversy ever since it was passed. Congress cites the necessary and proper clause to pass this law and its authority to pass this law, while obviously presidents, including every single president since Nixon, have said that they have the sole power, since they are the commander-in-chief, to authorize war, even if it is an undeclared one. This has to do with the separation of powers, as it causes conflict between the executive and legislative branch. This affects the modern-day political process, as now presidents are far more reluctant to use military force. In 2011, when we went to Libya, Obama said it was alright under the War Powers Act, due to the fact that it was NATO bombing Libya, and American forces are part of NATO. When in 2013, as many of us will probably remember, Obama came very, very close to bombing Syria, but did not, as he knew Congress would not authorize it and knew he'd come into conflict. This has affected policy decisions regarding foreign policy in today's world. This law is very important because we as a country don't want to get involved in a war like Vietnam ever again. Therefore, we have passed this law to limit wars in foreign areas.